Start with Paolini from Kula White Press. If you can please come on stage.
Ayaw saka. Magturanga saka kina Vanua. Vera saka na ngani turanga na kenay tauke. Na matinitu, na matububale, na matubewakani ko Melanesia. Ni busatiyaw saka ni sanga ni labayada. Nayada ni daw wakaminmini. Kavakasa wakikina. I'll be waking the baki and a bukungani Vanua. May bua nangani turanga. Natauke balatangani. Na Vanua ko to bata. May bayarasa ka nangani turanga. Lalanga besi. Turanga na titakaw. Lamanikoro, Naturangan Roksao. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and welcome. Now, I feel that I have nothing new to add, but I do have something that's a bit more interactive. So we're going to start with a game. I have to apologize, I came prepared with prizes, book prizes, but those got caught up at customs. So right after this, I'm just gonna run back to customs and see if I can bring them out. So I'm gonna be reading some well-known stories. And if you're brave enough, come on up here and tell me what the story is. If no one's brave enough, then maybe we can just call out the answer. But if you come up and answer, one of those books I'm gonna retrieve from customs is gonna be yours. Okay, here we go. Once upon a time, long, long ago, a king and queen ruled over a distant land. The queen was kind and lovely, and all the people of the realm adored her. The only sadness in the queen's life was that she wished for a child, but did not have one. One winter day, the queen was doing needlework while gazing out her ebony window at the new fallen snow. A bird flew by the window, startling the queen, and she pricked her finger. Now, don't expect me to finish it. So the first one, Snow White. I got three answers from the room. I don't know how you're gonna split a book, but thank you for participating. Second story. Once upon a time, there lived a widow woman and her son Jack on this small farm in the country. Every day, Jack would help his mother with the chores, chopping the wood, weeding the garden, and milking the cow. That was 4 to 5 answers. Okay, well done. Last story. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful chief's daughter named Yaleoni Vanimbula, which means Maiden of the Fair Wind. She lived on an island called Vatulele. Many chiefs from different places wanted to marry her because she was so pretty. But Yaleoni Vanimbula was very picky and always turned them down. Meanwhile, on the mainland of Vitilevu, there was a handsome and brave chief's son. He was going to be the next chief of his tribe. He heard about the beautiful daughter of the chief of Vatulele and decided that she would be the perfect wife for him. I'll give you a clue. I'm sure you think it's from Fiji. If you're from Fiji and you don't know this, I'm questioning a lot of things right now. So he prepared himself and brought special gifts, then set off on a journey to meet Yaleoni Vanimbula. When he arrived on Vatulele, the chiefs welcomed him warmly. He proudly presented his special gift, a bundle of giant prawns from the streams of Vitilevu, cooked in tasty coconut milk. He thought this delicious treat would win her heart, but he was wrong. Yaleoni Vanimbula became angry instead of being impressed. she ordered her ladies-in-waiting to capture him and take him to the highest cliff on the island called the Caves of the Eagles. Then they threw him into the sea. As he fell, the red prawns he brought slipped from his hands and fell into a rocky pool at the bottom of the cliff. I have a few more sentences to go, but I'm going to cut it there because I can clearly tell that no one knows the story. Okay, so this is a well-known traditional folktale from my homeland, Fiji. It talks about how the red prawns originated and came to Vatulele. Now let me ask you a question. How come you know stories that originated thousands and thousands of miles away from us, and you did not know the story from my homeland, which is just a couple of 100 kilometers away?
Blame it on the colonizers.
Colonizers. Okay, that's a good answer. But is that all? How do you think we got these stories? Some of us are millennials, some are baby boomers. We didn't grow up in the digital age, but what did we have? We had books, and so did they. These stories were passed down through physical books. So I guess that's where I want to start. When I'm talking about the challenges and opportunities for Melanesian publishers, I'm talking about books. What can we do to encourage our community, our society, to go back into a culture of reading? So the objectives is just 3 objectives, just to see the state of publishing and literacy in Melanesia, to identify challenges in publishing across Melanesia and identify way forward for Melanesian publishing. Why does literary documentation matter? Because it preserves indigenous knowledge and tradition. It's crucial for cultural continuity. Melanesian cultural documentation serves as a tool to empower future generations by providing access to ancestral wisdom. Now this is an ideal picture here. We have a young boy who's reading from a young age, and he's continuing to read as he progresses to a higher state of his education. But what the picture is actually this. The young boy is missing. A lot of us feel that when it's time for us to write and tell our stories, when it's time for us to document, it's when we graduate from high school. And so there's a huge, huge gap because we're not nurturing it from a younger age. And sometimes people stumble across writing. Oh yeah, they go through high school, then they think, yeah, I want to be a journalist or I want to be a writer when they're in university. But we can't leave that to chance, can we? We must cultivate this love for reading and writing from a very young age. So this is just some stats from SPC on the PILNA examination, PILNA, Pacific Islands Literacy and Numeracy Assessment. And we see that overall, numeracy assessment is actually higher compared to literacy. And when I talk about literacy, unfortunately, it's in the colonizer language. We're only being examined on our grasp of the English language and the French language. But when I talk about literacy, I'm talking on a broader scale, not just English, French, but our vernacular as well. Okay, so back to the story that I mentioned in the beginning. So this is an example of folk tales. This is a folk tale from Norse mythology about the Snow Queen. Now, sometimes we think, oh, it's just children's tales. What good is that? It's not gonna get me a certificate. But what we see here is this tales is being passed down and it's preserving. We can look back. It's actually a historical document. The story itself is a historical document. We can see the climate in Europe, the geography. It talks about the ancient beliefs. In The Little Mermaid, talks about not only the story of a mermaid who wants to come to the human world, but it touches on trade, what the trade was like during that time, travel, and the relationship that the Nordic culture has to nature. Beauty and the Beast, historical context. This is actually, they show that the cultural practices and traditions were of arranged marriages behind Beauty and the Beast. So this is actually the global book publishing market, which is worth $91.39 billion of 2023. And right now, the big five of publishing, Simon & Schuster, Macmillan, Hachette, Penguin Random House, and I forget the last one. But I want to ask the question, what percentage of Melanesian publishers can weigh in on these numbers? Because it's not just a question of how are we preserving our culture, that's all well and said, good. How are we preserving our language? But I think it's also an economic question. Do we want to weigh in on these numbers? Do we want to make writing something that is a viable option for our kids to grow up and become writers? Do we want to commoditize it? Do we want to commercialize it so that it can bring in the money? So unfortunately, there is little to no conclusive data that shows that we even have a seat at the table, that we have a piece of this lucrative pie. I did my research, and the last research publication about Melanesian publishing was from a Solomon Islander academic, and that was way back in 1993-94. So just some challenges in documentation. I can't claim to be a big, well-known publisher, but I do run a small publishing house back home in Fiji called Kulawai Press. And but I'm speaking broadly for Melanesia when I say that one of the challenges is linguistic diversity. We know that our brothers from Papua New Guinea is the most diverse linguistically in the world. So imagine all those languages that is dying out, as Mr. Bina had mentioned. What are we doing about it? Are we documenting it? And also our education and literacy levels. So these low literacy rates and limited access to quality education in some regions of Melanesia can hinder the demand of books. We also have distribution challenges. A lot of us are self-published, and it's hard writing, it's hard editing, it's hard putting your work out there. And then what makes it harder, where we're going to sell it, who's interested enough to read it. And also our market size. Market size is very small. I don't need to reiterate that any further. And also financial constraints. Right now, can you make a living full-time? As a writer, that's your dream. Can you write novels full-time? Can you be a poet full-time? Unfortunately not. But it's certainly something that we should be addressing. How can we mitigate these factors? We also have competition from international publishers. And also international publishers like to pose the question, is it because they have great marketing, they are able to bring in this revenue year after year and make money from stories? Or is it because the market is already there? Is it because they've already cultivated, nurtured a love of reading in their young people? You know, when they're small, they grow up, so they always have a market. And that's something that we need to do. How can we grow our market in order to be competitive? And also, thank you. And also cultural sensitivities, piracy and copyright issues. That's a big, big topic. We can go down the rabbit hole with that. Limited support for funding. Okay, so these are some of the ways to address and mitigate these factors. I'm happy to share these slides with you, so I'm going to go very quickly through it. Promotion of literacy and education, multilingual publishing, collaborative distribution networks, support for local publishers, digital publishing and ebooks. local author development, strengthening copyright enforcement, public awareness and marketing, cross-cultural collaborations, integration of traditional knowledge, community engagement. And just for the academic institutions, because I know this is co-convened by the National University of Vanuatu, these are some of the things that I hope that you can take on board in addressing these issues. Okay, so if you're an aspiring publisher, this is another topic that we can discuss even further, but I just want to give some practical steps. If you want to get into publishing, I'm not an expert, but I've done these steps, and so I hope that it can be helpful to some of you. Register your publishing house. You might have different laws in your country. In Fiji, the government has made it very easy to digitally register your business, and you don't even have to have a business account. You can start off as self-employed and just have it under your own name. Consider online publishing platforms. I know that we value physical books, but if we don't get on board this, we will be behind the times. And it's important to get our children reading, even if they prefer using gadgets. So over there, Amazon, what's good about that, it's paid on demand. You don't have to do any printing. When someone orders it, prints, ships to the buyer. Draft to Digital, Kobo Books, those are completely digital platforms, not physical and digital. Barnes & Nobles and Ingram Sparks, that's physical and digital platforms. Talk to your local printers. Some of us are outsourcing. I know China might have a better product, but we have to support our local economy and outsource to them. Network with your schools, your government agencies. This is a great time to network because we have everybody from every sector who's here for this event. And I'm also here to ask that you sell on Yuhu. I have this poster, you can ask for it. I can give you it. So it's like an Etsy of the Pacific. So you can put your handicraft as long as it's Pacific Bay. Artwork, books, hair products, skin products, listed up here. It's free to sign up. You can post your products up, and they only take a 5% cut when someone buys your product. Unlike Etsy, you have a listing fee of 20 US cents every time you put up a listing here. Put 100, 200, 1,000 listings. It's free until you make a sale. And lastly, please submit your stories to the First Nations Writers Festival. Thank you so much for some of you who've taken pictures with our flyers. But this is going to be an anthology that's going to be released later this year or next year. You can see some Melanesian writers here whose works will be included in the anthology. We have a call for submission on short stories and books. We have a book award for short stories. We award winners around 200 to 500 Australian dollars. For book awards, 2,000 to 5,000 Australian dollars. It's not much, but we hope it will encourage you to write and get published. And part of that fee will be deducted to go into editing your work, because editing is expensive. So they'll take a bit to do some editing. They'll market it, but you keep your copyright. And lastly, I had to change my slide because a colleague of mine wanted me to add this. Just how to say Vinaka as a Melanesian family. So if someone from Fiji was addressing Melanesian brothers, we'd say Vinaka Tumas. Or if someone from Solomon Islands was addressing the rest of us, they proposed saying Tangio Wakalevu Tumas. And if someone was a Kanak brother, would address us with Merci Ogeta. And just in order to find common ground and closer integration, and he really wanted this to be tabled, even in the Melanesian Spearhead group, if you can have it documented, it would be great. So, in conclusion, preserving the past and empowering the future for Melanesian cultures through effective documentation is an ongoing endeavor, but valuing and engaging with indigenous knowledge, we can ensure the sustainability and diversity of Melanesian heritage for generations to come. So with that, Vinaka Tumas, Tanya Wakalevu Tumas, Merci Ogeta.
Vinaka Tumas, Paulini, merci, thank you Tumas. Thank you again for this encouragement to have more publishers in Melanesia. So we have time for questions now. Anyone would like to comment or ask a question? Maybe I have one for you to start. So you have created Kalawai Press. Maybe you can say what were your main challenges when you have decided to build up this press, and also to mention that hopefully tomorrow you will display some books if you can get them out of custom. So what were the main challenges, please?
Thank you. I think as a publisher, I'm going to be publishing for the first time later this year a local writer in an anthology, but I think there's very little interest that I find. I've actually put out so many call of submissions because I'm willing to do the work to help edit it, line edit, developmental edit, but I rarely get any response. So it's the interest that's been difficult. And when it comes to writers, a lot of our writers work in silos. We hardly have a network or an association, an active association. We don't have writing groups. We don't have MFAs in our universities. Why don't we have a Masters of Fine Arts in Literature or in Creative Writing? We don't have those. So, yeah, a lot of these things are very internal, and I find myself looking abroad so much. But I think with what I have been able to gain and achieve, I'm thankful that it was done while I lived in Fiji. I didn't leave to pursue this writing, this publishing dream, and I feel it's possible for us to remain in our homeland and write our stories and publish it and take it across the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to learn about your press. I guess I had two questions following on from what you had said. One is your thoughts on the digital as a form. I mean, you were encouraging people to, publish two ways, but just the challenge of distribution to local audiences. We think often about this question of like, can we publish in physical form, but then how do we get to people? And if we publish in digital form, the digital divides are real for people. So that's my first question. And then a second one around, I guess, the role of universities in supporting Melanesian publishing and Melanesian writing. I guess I come from Australia, so, this is something that we have historically done a bit of, but there also seems like maybe there are some risks of then Melanesian writers publishing with other institutions or other places. Just any comments you have on those dilemmas.
Thank you. I'll try to answer your question. I'm very old school. I love a physical book. I love the smell. I love flipping through it. But, the question is, what's the lesser of two evils? Will we continue to fight for physical books at the cost of our children not being interested in physical books because they're always in front of their gadgets? So I think we have to compromise in some areas. Sure, let's publish physical books, but let's also embrace digitization and encourage our children to read. But then we also have to ask ourselves, how do children pick up reading in the first place? They pick it up if they see you reading. If you read, if you show that example, they will pick it up. And they're not going to pick it up if we force them. So I think there's definitely a space for us to embrace digital works. And we have our colleagues here from the Asian Foundation who that's their field of expertise on how to get children to read. Also, when it comes to the distribution, I love the practice in, I think, Tahiti. Many years ago, they decided that every year they would put out a call for submissions from everybody. It doesn't matter how old you were, what your socioeconomic background was. So when they did a publication, a 6-year-old would have their poem or their artwork next to a veteran writer. And as the years went by and they looked back, they had this whole body of work that documented their history. And so while I champion the fact that we should be very stringent on editing and putting out the best products, but to start with, I think we can put that bar lower and make it accessible for people to put in their work, whether it's a 6-year-old or a 60-year-old. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you for your word, but let me say some few would Melanesian men with a small child walk past a bookshop and buy a book for their child? There's a challenge that I find in Papua New Guinea. The men can buy a carton of beer with no questions about it. Or 2 or 3, and no questions asked. But to get a book for a child is very, very difficult. So we've got a difficult problem to get that mindset around getting that. So we've in writing books and whatever, we've got a whole lot of issues that we want to address. But let me not discourage people by saying that the market for books is out there, whether it's for the adult, for the old one, for the child, for everyone. There is a market for everyone. Everybody needs to write. But let's all collectively work together and we need to go and start doing all of those. I've self-published since 1993. That's a long time. 10 books. I don't have the readership. Or do I have the readership? I don't know. Because every time I publish on Amazon KDP, they're 3 months free. Why not everybody reads over it and afterwards they don't even download and buy my books? But the free one, they tell me that we've read it, that we like it. And I say, okay, good. And I'm looking at my account in Amazon, Google, and it doesn't go up anywhere any further than that. So then with this electronic one, that's good, okay, but they've got this 3 months period that they would be putting out for that. Then after that, they charge. I'm not sure with the other platforms that you raised. But those are the issues that we have in trying to get about. Firstly, we need to get our people to read books, our books. And I keep on talking about Chimamanda Adichie. She's talking about her African experience. She wants to tell her story the African way. Why don't we tell our stories our Pacific way? Our Melanesian way, so that our Melanesian people can read it. Currently, all the things that we are reading is one-sided from the other side. We're talking about going on all of these things, but it's another people that see it from the other perspective. It's not from our perspective. So we've got a lot of issues around that, and we can be able to do it, but it's a doable thing. But firstly, let's get the stories and ideas and whatnot in print. Somewhere along the line, somebody should wake up. It's my fervent belief. I've not made any money with writing books. So 200,000 words and still continue. I've got nothing, but I'm fervent in this. I want to write something so that I can leave a legacy for somebody. So if you're not going to make any money, leave a legacy for your children and somebody that you can go. So let's write, let's work, and then work around on publishing. And I hope that the government can wake up to it. And it just needs government intervention. Okay? You're talking about the Australian experience where they've got a authors synonymous or authors AA group, and they say, we'll publish 10 books. People write and then they compete and they get and sponsor that. We need governments, a government that do that. Say, okay, we're going to publish 10 books, but we need people to submit the manuscript, and they publish that for us, and then they put it through the schools. That way we can be able to get. If I am doing it individually, I haven't got anywhere. Woe be to you, everyone that is one of us. We need to. But please don't stop writing. That's my encouragement. Don't stop writing. Someday there will be what they call the chips will fall in place for us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bin, and I totally agree. I don't think many Melanesian men would walk with their child across a bookstore. But what can you do in private? I think a lot of Melanesian men wouldn't do that in public. What if you read to your child in private in the safety of your home? What if you started practicing these things within your family? And I totally agree with Papa Bina. about the sales. I think I comes back to you. If you publish on Amazon, Amazon takes a 30% cut if your country does not have a tax treaty with America. So imagine taking 30% from your profit, net profit. So maybe what can Australia do to give us a better deal for Pacific Islands? Perhaps we have existing treaties, economic treaties, that maybe won't tax us so much on the royalties of our books. Yeah, so thank you.
Inaka Tumas, thank you, Tumas. I'm loving the legacy of what you're doing for the future generations. I hope we all wake up one day and realize how valuable and how important this is to actually restore our heritage, our history, and everything, our livelihoods, because this is it. Yeah, writing is it. I have a question around intellectual property in terms of us submitting our cultural stories to you, and of course the publishers. You know, it's going to be an international audience reading this. How do we protect ourselves, or how do we protect our custom stories? Yeah, just something for us to think about as well.
It certainly is, because I don't think I have an answer to that. It's very, very tricky. But I value intellectual property. I think that's why I put writing aside for a bit, and I wanted to focus on publishing, because as a publisher, it takes time to understand the inner workings of publishing. And I asked myself the question, how do I value the writer? So I'm thinking, what's the contract? You have to write the contract down. What's stipulated in the contract? Do I give you a one-time fee and that property is mine? Do I give you royalties for how long? I think US laws is 70 years after a writer's death, the family get royalties. After that 70 years, it's public domain property. So that's a good question, and I think it's going to rest on each individual Melanesian country to come up with their own legislature. Abroad, they work with lawyers, they work with agents who negotiate these terms, and we're still in the writing phase. We're not even in the contract phase where we're trying to negotiate terms. We're not, but we have to catch up. Look how long books have been around, but we're still lagging behind. The whole world has progressed into digital, and then now we're just picking up on books. What are we to do? We have to wake up and find solutions, and I hope we can even have summits for writers yearly, or have something like this, like MacFest, but for writing. And it's an issue that we have to work together with communally as a Melanesian family. Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas, again, Berlini. I also would like to acknowledge the work done by Anna Naopa with the Our Historian Initiative, which is run also as part of the Melanesian Arts and Culture Festival. It's a great place for writers, or young and older writers, to chair. So thank you again, Berlini. And we move now to the second presentation. Mrs. Bea Wilson and Rowan.
Hello, and thank you, Thomas, for involving us in the symposium today. My name is Rowan Henderson, and this is my colleague Leah Wilson. We're from the National Library of Australia, and we're here today to share information about the library, what we hold in our collections relating to Melanesia and the Pacific, and to let you know how you can access these collections and remake whatever they are. So first of all, we would like to acknowledge that the library where we work is on the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. We would like to pay our respects to these traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work, and where the collections we're talking about today are held. We'd also like to pay our respects to the Melanesian people and thank them for welcoming us to this symposium, and especially the people of Vanuatu. We'd also like to advise you that our presentation contains images of people who may have passed, so if that makes you uncomfortable, then please feel free to leave while Leah's talking about the collections. So the National Library of Australia is the country's largest reference library, with over 500 million Australian and online resources. We hold books, images, newspapers, maps, music, archives, and more. The library also provides access to thousands of ebooks and digitised materials, many of which are freely available online. We have a brochure with us that explains a bit more about the library and our collections in detail, so feel free to come up and ask one of us for one of those if you'd like to know more.
So in the library's early days, we collected material that related to the wider world quite prolifically. This history of collecting means that we hold a significant collection of materials relating to the Pacific. Nowadays, we focus our Pacific collecting specifically on Melanesia, acknowledging that the National Libraries of New Zealand and Hawaii have collecting strengths in Polynesia and Micronesia. We now prioritise collecting published material relating to Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Fiji, New Caledonia, as well as Timor-Leste, acknowledging the importance of our relationships with our Pacific cousins. We'd now like to share a few examples from our collection, but please keep in mind there's so much more to discover, and that these examples are just the tip of the iceberg. They'll also tell you how you can actually access these collections. The NLA holds several serial titles from First Nations activist groups from Vanuatu and Kanaki, New Caledonia, ranging from the 1960s to the 1990s. They're currently being explored by Dr. Angelique Stasny as part of her 2023 National Library Fellowship Project, examining the role of publications in Indigenous struggles against settler colonialism. And we'll talk more about the NLA fellowships shortly. These periodicals document the struggle for independence from colonial rule led by grassroots liberation organisations. We hold these in a combination of hard copy, microfilm and digitally, some of them shared with other institutes. The NLA is in the unique position to provide access to a selection of these publications in the one location. And some of them include the following titles. They include New Hebridean Viewpoints, later Vanuatu Viewpoints, and this was published in English, French and Bislama, and was the monthly magazine of the New Hebrides National Party. We also hold Nouvelle 1878 Andimado, which was published by Le Gros, 1878, Nouméa, Kanak, Organised d'Information du Parti de Libération Kanak, which was published by the Kanak Liberation Party, which began in 1975 to 1976. And this particular publication had a focus on disseminating political news within Kanaki, New Caledonia. We also hold issues of Buenando, Le Premier Journal du Kanaki, which was a weekly journal in Nouméa, first published in 1985 until 1989. As well as Benunda, we also hold La Dépêche Kanak. And further to these, we also hold many Pacific newspapers and information relating to current events. They include newspapers from many Pacific countries, including Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, New Zealand and the Marshall Islands. These publications cover a range of dates in print, microfilm and through online databases. And if you'd like to explore these further, we have an overseas newspaper guide on our website, as well as more information about searching and accessing these collections. We hold also Pacific Islands Monthly from 1930 onwards to 2000, and while this periodical was originally published in Sydney, this was the only journal circulating at the time throughout the island territories and groups of the Central and South Pacific. And at the time of its initial publication, it documented current events and topics in Pacific countries, and the articles were written by well-respected journalists from the Pacific region. All of our holdings of this periodical have been digitised and can be viewed on Trove and Digital Pacific, which are two online platforms which we will discuss shortly. We also selectively archive Pacific websites, mostly government and research sites, and usually around a Pacific theme or focus. So what I've done is I've broken some of these into general themes. Now, the National Library assisted recently, or worked with the National Archives of Fiji to digitise and make accessible the Indian immigration passes to Fiji, which dated from 1879 to 1916. These are the originals are held with the National Archives of Fiji. And these combined records of Indian indentured labourers of Fiji, Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago were placed on the UNESCO Memory of the World list in 2011. Researchers of Indian indentured labourers who emigrated to Fiji can find a great deal of information using the Indian indentured labourer collection. Records include immigration passes, general registers, repatriation registers, plantation registers and death registers. So for anyone potentially looking into family history, these can be really valuable resources. We also have the Australian South Sea Islander collection, which is a collection of oral history interviews. These were 88 recorded oral histories. These were done between 1974 and 1980 with Australian South Sea Islanders living in the Mackay region of Australia. These interviews were conducted by Clive Moore and Patricia Mercer, and mainly with the children or grandchildren of the first immigrant generation to arrive in Australia, aged between the 60s and 90s. The original generation were part of the approximately 50,000 Pacific Islanders who entered into 62,000 indentured labour contracts between 1863 and 1904, coming from around 80 different islands in what is now Vanuatu and the Solomon Islands. The NLA is currently in the process of working with family and communities of individuals who were originally interviewed to update the access conditions of these recordings, with the hope of making these materials more accessible for researchers and family members in the future. On that note, we'd also like to acknowledge the generous assistance of Oscar Imelda Davies, who has helped to facilitate much of this consultation for communities, and we note that we also hold an oral history from her, which is available online as well, which was recorded last year. We also have a significant collection of maps of the Pacific region, over 600 of them, and some of these date back as far as the 15th century. Professor Katerina Tiawa of the Australian National University has recently delved into this collection as part of her research of Banaba in Kiribati and the impact of phosphate mining on the island and culture of its people as part of Project Banaba. This one here is a map by Abrahamus Ortelius, and it dates from the 16th century and depicts the Pacific Ocean, as well as parts of Southeast Asia, America, Australia and New Guinea. We also hold a number of manuscript materials from a number of researchers. We also, including Arthur Capel. Now, he was an Australian Anglican clergyman who was also a linguist and anthropologist. He spent a lot of time studying Melanesian languages, and the library holds 51 archive boxes of his research materials. These include linguistics, so materials related to linguistics, sociology, ethnography, musicology from across the globe, but also specifically to New Guinea, Fiji, Southeast and East Asia, Melanesia, Polynesia and Micronesia, as well as Australian Indigenous languages. His collection is held jointly with Pambu, who have digitised his recordings of Melanesian languages. And while his papers are not yet digitised, the recordings are available online through Pambu's catalogue. We also are currently in the process of digitising the South Pacific Commission collections, and this aligns with their 75th anniversary of establishment of the South Pacific Commission. It includes the personal papers of W.D. Forsyth, who was the first Secretary General of the South Pacific Commission, over 650 publications issued by the South Pacific Commission, many of a technical nature relating to agriculture, fisheries, nutrition, public health, social development and the arts, as well as a collection of 78 manuscripts on microfilm, which were written by missionaries, anthropologists, linguists and other scholars between 1900 and 1956. The majority of these works consist of dictionaries and vocabularies of First Nations peoples' languages of the South Pacific. And on that note, we do acknowledge that, I think as Millicent so beautifully put it, that a lot of these earlier research materials I suppose the situation around the creation was often very exploitative and obviously very extractive. We hope that through these materials, at least, even acknowledging that history, that they might be able to be used for language revival activities, awakening sleeping languages, and trying to strengthen other languages that might be a bit endangered and fragile at this time. So I might skip through. We're getting a bit tight for time. So we do also have some portraits by a fellow named Brett Hilder, who visited Melanesia and the Solomon Islands in the 1950s. He actually did some watercolours of Pacific peoples, and although most of them haven't been digitised yet, we've recently acquired one of a gentleman named Simi of Baumelakula. And we don't know anything about him, so if anyone knows anything about him, we would love to talk to you because we want to make sure we get our catalogue record right. We would love to know who he is. So please come talk to us afterwards if you can. We also hold a photographic collection with further representations of the Pacific, particularly the J.W. Beatty collection, which features almost 1,000 historic photographs of people, including individual portraits and landscapes of South and Western Pacific countries in 1906, as well as the Terence and Margaret Spencer collection, which focuses on Papua New Guinea from 1953 to 1978. And here we have a photograph of Reverend Clement Morale and his family from the Solomon Islands. This is from the J.W. Beatty collection. And here we have a photograph from the Lunar New Year celebrations in Papua New Guinea in 1960 from the Terence and Margaret Spencer collection. We also recognise the importance of collaboration and efforts to preserve and make accessible rare and unique materials. Further to the immigration passes mentioned above and serving as the caretaker for parts of the distributed collections such as Capel, the library also provides access to the Pacific Manuscripts Bureau collection through our own online subscription. Pacific Manuscripts Bureau copies archives, manuscripts and rare printed material relating to the Pacific Islands. The aim of the Bureau is to help with long-term preservation of the documentary heritage of the Pacific Islands and to make it accessible. The materials within the database range from the 16th century onwards, and the database includes European, Asian and Pacific language materials. The Pacific Manuscripts Bureau collection is the most extensive collection of non-government primary documentation of the Pacific Islands available to researchers, And the NLA has made this remarkable collection of material available to our registered library users.
So, as we mentioned earlier, collecting from and about the countries of Asia and the Pacific is the library's next highest priority after collecting material about Australia. So priority in Asia-Pacific collecting is given to materials about China, Indonesia and Timor-Leste, materials from Melanesia, and resources relating to the modern era of each country. We acquire works supporting research on history, politics, government, economy, culture, environment and social issues. We mostly acquire items and books, books and newspapers mainly, through arrangements with vendors who provide us with anything published within a particular country on a range of topics that we specify. We do also actively look for items to acquire. The library has one of these so-called blanket orders with the vendor Mary Martin. In the last financial year, they provided us with 160 titles published in the Pacific. Our collecting has been challenged with what we've been all talking about today, the reduction in print publishing of Pacific-created books, with fewer titles acquired. The reasons are for all the reasons that we've been talking about today, and the fact that many publications may now only be published on the web. The library does have a digital preferred strategy, whereby we prefer to collect items in their born digital status. However, implementing this in the Pacific will require some new ways of collecting. Recently, the library has also undertaken some targeted collecting projects to increase the representation of Fijian Australians in our collection. The Fijian Australian community was chosen because Australia is home to the largest Fijian population outside of Fiji itself, and Fijians have been a presence in Australia since the 1800s. The Fijian Australian community is diverse, reflecting the vibrant nature of contemporary Fiji. For this project, we reached out to Fijian Australian communities and individuals, letting them know about our project and encouraging community groups to deposit their publications with the library. We also asked people to contact us if they wanted to do an oral history with us. As a result, we've undertaken 66 oral histories, most of which are available to listen to from our website. We've talked to people about depositing their manuscript collections, and we commissioned photography to document the contemporary expressions of Fijian culture in Australia. We acquired 121 photographs of events held by Fijian Australian communities. You can see a few examples on this screen, and they can all be found on our catalogue. We were also honoured to become custodians of the manuscript collection of internationally recognised academic Professor Bridge Lal and ecological economist Dr. Padma Nasi Lal. These form a significant and exciting addition to the library's holdings of material relating to Fiji and the Indian diaspora. So it's our aim to provide open access to the library's collections wherever we can. Apart from actually coming to the library, which means you have to come to Canberra to view the items, we do try to make them available online, and we do this through the website Trove and Digital Pacific. Trove is a collaborative website which showcases the collections of Australian cultural institutions run by the library with our partners. Digital Pacific, however, is the best place to find collections online relating to the Pacific. This project brought together representatives from Pacific Islander communities, the National Library of Australia, the National Library of New Zealand, and the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to co-design and deliver the site, digitalpacific.org. The goal was to empower people in and of the Pacific Islands, enabling them to see, discover and explore items of digitised cultural heritage that are held in collections around the world. We're a partner and contributor to the site, and it's the best place to see our collections relating to the Pacific. There are 658 content partners on that site, sharing over 440,000 items. Pacific-based content partners include the Papua New Guinea National Museum and Art Gallery, the Solomon Islands National Museum, Micronesian Seminar, Pacific Community, Fijian History website, and NGO Pacifica Renaissance. Another way you can connect with our collections is through applying for a fellowship to come to Canberra and research the collection. The library runs an annual fellowships program which offers researchers an opportunity to undertake a 12-week residency at the library. You can work in any field or discipline, so you could be an artist or an academic or a poet or a musician, where the library's collections have the depth and breadth to support your research. These are open to individuals at any stage of development, and two types are followed, one honorary and one paid. It's open to international applicants as long as you can apply for a visa to Australia. Funded fellowships receive an honorarium of $1,000 a week per 12 weeks, Australian dollars, and accommodation support of $700 per week for 12 weeks if required. Reimbursement of international travel is capped at $2,500 and limited to one return flight. While the application round for the 2024 fellowships has closed, we'd encourage you to take a look at the fellowships page and on our website and consider whether this would be an opportunity for you and your research next year. So we have 3 messages from our presentation. Please check out our collections online through either Trove or Digital Pacific and have a look at Melanesian culture through those websites. Please check out our fellowships and see how you can come and use the collections held at the National Library to reinvigorate Melanesian culture. And please come and chat with us. We would love to talk, and we do have those brochures with a bit more information about the library. Thank you, Tomas.
Thank you very much to both of you for this very exhaustive presentation of the National Library of Australia collection. 500 million of documents, it's kind of a dream for most of us. So is there any question or comments? Sharing resources is so important for researchers, so thank you for also giving the opportunity to researchers present in the room to have a chat with you later on.
How do people get access to, they have to get a number, have access to resources? Do you have to be in touch to a university to be able to have access to the library?
No, so anyone is able to turn up to the library and ask for a reader card, which you'll be given on the spot, and you can then access our collections. You don't have to be attached to a library. We're open to...
Yes, I think with the... I think there is an online form, isn't there? Or it's I think the reader cards are a bit tricky. So I think they usually need an Australian address for those, but because a lot of our materials are available through Trove and Digital Pacific, you don't necessarily need a reader card for that. So a lot of those relevant materials you can go through those platforms instead and get around through it that way.
Thank you for the presentation. I was interested about your oral histories. How do you conduct that? Do you look for cultural readers, or do people approach you? What kind of stories are they telling you, and how do you document that?
Yeah, we have a really long-running program of conducting oral histories at the National Library. I can see someone nodding, they know all about it. The library actually trains oral historians to conduct interviews, and where possible we try and find people from the community to conduct those interviews. So for the Fijian Australians community project, we trained new oral history interviewers from the Fijian Australian community, and they conducted interviews also in language as well as in English. They're whole of life interviews, so people aren't being interviewed on a particular topic. It's about you and your life from cradle to the moment of being interviewed. And those they're all digitised, our entire back catalogue of oral histories. Not every oral history is available to listen to online, because it depends on the access conditions placed on that interview by the person being interviewed. They get to choose whether it's available for people to listen to now or whether it needs to be closed to a certain point in the future. But yes, if you search our catalogue for particular people and you come across someone, please get in touch and we can tell you whether we can make that available or not.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. How can we help for New Caledonia to update? Because you were talking about Fiji and the other Melanesian country, and I just checked on your database and I saw the picture of my grandfather. So I was looking if someone can update, how can you say is good or is not good? Understand?
Please send us an email. We're very keen to update our catalogue records to make sure that they accurately reflect, the materials and who's in them and the photos and things like that. There should be an online form that you can sort of fill in, and if you put in I think this is on the catalogue record, there's a bib ID, which is the individual identifier for that photo. Mention that and just mention that it's your grandfather and any information you'd like us to know or include, and we can look to update it from that. There might be a little bit of a delay at the moment because we are changing over our new catalogue to our new one, so everything's kind of frozen for, I think, probably about another week or two. But we do try, any information like that, it's gratefully received. So we want to get it right.
Thank you so much again, and we now move for the last presentation of today. Yeah. So Christelle from the Asia Foundation.
Vinaka. Thank you so much, Vinaka Thomas. My name is Christelle Lavaki, and I have the amazing privilege of working with Pacific Creatives to make children's books for the Let's Read digital platform. Before I get into everything, I just wanted to say thank you again to my sisters and brothers of Melanesia, and especially in Vanuatu, for hosting something like this. I feel very out of place in this situation because everybody's been extremely academic up to this point, and I'm coming in with a very, very colorful slideshow talking about children's books. What is Let's Read? On the bookshelf, you'll see a collection of books. And up until 2020, we never really had any of these books available online. And so these were done in Fiji. So the Let's Read Pacific Islands created these 10 storybooks in Fiji around oceans and climate action. And we worked with artists and illustrators and authors from Fiji to create a collection of these books. But more importantly, so what is Let's Read? It is a free digital library. It's got over 10,000 books in over 50 languages. Right now, because the Pacific Islands Let's Read program is still fairly new, the languages currently only are in Tokpisin, Voxa Vakaviti, Fiji Bat, and Fiji Sign Language. I'm really hoping after the symposium we'll add Bislama to this list. We also had sent out some EOIs because another reason why we're here is also to create the first ever Melanesian series for the Let's Read platform. One of the issues that the Let's Read digital library wants to address is literacy. And the simple logic behind the Let's Read library is making stories in languages children understand, making main characters and setting scenes that they see themselves in, that they see every day, and telling stories that they can relate to. And it sounds really, really simple until you actually do it. And we'll get into that a bit later. But there's 3 big pillars that Let's Read is based on. The first one is around book labs. And book labs is just a really fancy way of saying that's how we create books. We sit with writers in writers' labs. We try as much as possible not to take out people's voices from their own stories. We help them edit and we help them make their stories a little bit more appropriate for our age, for the audience that we have on our platform. And so sometimes it's simple things like language, making language a bit more conversational, so as much as possible not taking away the main story, and especially not taking away main components of their story. Like instead of saying bag, if somebody wants to say bilum, we are more than happy to make sure that bilum is in your story. The next one is around partnerships, and this is something that goes throughout the program. It's about equitable partnerships. We're a very small program. We don't have lots of money, but a lot of the work that we do is through partnerships. And sometimes that means somebody gives us money where we can print books. And that's what we did last year. We managed to print 24,000 books that went out to 796 schools around Fiji in 3 different languages. So these are when we talk about partnerships, that's one of the big ones. But partnerships more so around our book labs and the people we engage with. When we engage with writers, when we engage with illustrators, we're making sure that there's an equal partnership, that they're compensated for their time and they understand that story writing, storytelling, illustrating somebody's story has value. And we hope that we can uphold these values. And the last one is on translation. Children, I'd love just to go back to what Pauline mentioned about creating that love for reading. And I think it's this thing that keeps going around. We're trying to figure out how do we get our kids to read. If our children are learning to read in a 3rd language, then it's going to be really difficult for them. In Fiji, and I speak from the Fiji perspective at least, our children are writing in English, they're copying their notes and they're doing all these things, but there's no comprehension because it's not their first language. So translation is a very, very big thing. If our children don't see the books in their language, especially the first books that they get to read, we can't expect them to love to read. It's going to become this big chore. So this is a quick overview of how we work around book creations, translations, publishing, and reading programs. Like I mentioned before, book labs are just about creating books. We have workshops with writers and we have workshops with illustrators. I just wanted to touch on the modalities of it. So book labs, traditionally, in other places that we've done book labs, it's always been in person. But then COVID came and taught us we need to change the approach. So we have 3 different ways that we can do these book labs. For the Melanesian series that we're creating, that's pretty much all virtual. So no matter where you are in the world, we can still create these stories and we can still put it up on our digital platform, so our children can still have access to these books. A hybrid one would be where it's held in person and somebody locally hosts these workshops. As much as possible, we want local people to facilitate these things, because there's nothing worse than, we know how this feels in the Pacific when an outsider comes in and tells you how to tell your story. So as much as possible, we work with local organizations. And the last one is fully in person, which is what we've done in a couple of the cases. Translation is done through our learning institute, so we work with the University of the South Pacific. We also work with our Itoke Trust Fund as a partnership, and we look for other partnerships around the region to do this. While we want to vet the languages, we also make sure that the language is peer-reviewed, so it's conversational. Because some of our books are for 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds, and we don't necessarily want them to be learning formal, say, Fijian in our language. A child is not going to pick up a book and automatically know all of these very, very big Fijian terms. So as much as possible, the language is very, very conversational. I just wanted to add as well, translation also is really important for our diaspora community. This is a vehicle for teaching our diaspora community their mother tongue. We found it with the Itoke Trust Fund board back in Fiji, where it was a very, very big push, especially for Fijian families living abroad, where they go to schools, nobody speaks the language that they speak, so it's really difficult for parents to teach the language, and we're losing the language in that sense. Publishing, we're not a very, very big publishing place, but if you have stories, if you have children's stories, we can host them digitally. That's as much as we can do, but we're always looking for partnerships, so we're always happy to see where we can always meet halfway. Reading programs is another tool that we use and another partnership that we engage with. This is through community libraries mostly and community reading programs, especially for early childhood development literacy programs, hoping that if we partner with these groups, give them content or give them books that are in their languages, we'll create little communities of children who love to read. I just wanted to share 2 examples, and it's really 2 questions that we ask. So in our illustrators workshops, this is one of the first questions that's asked. Who are our main characters? I realize this is a Polynesian example, but it's a really funny one, because the story was about the little girl that liked to dance, and automatically the illustrator drew a ballerina in the dream. And so it took almost 2 days to talk the illustrator through, no, what about the woman that does the siva with a headdress, and what does that look like? What do you see? Another example was the illustrator saw the words, my papa's farm, and the first thing they drew was a big red barn. And nowhere in the Pacific have we got these 4-story big red barns. We might have a little mbure outside, or, it's these small things. And I think that's a really, really important thing with how we tell our stories, how we illustrate them, is we try and develop this thing of being unapologetic. We shouldn't be mandua, we shouldn't be ashamed of our little farmhouses, our mbanivuaka outside, our pigs, our pig pens. We shouldn't be ashamed of our traditional costumes and our headdresses. That's our ballerinas. That's our traditional forms. And so we're not coming in as saviors and saying, oh, you have to do this. It's really supporting these illustrators, because all they're doing is drawing and showing what they're seeing. So as much as possible, we want the the raw Pacific. We want our mothers with their hair in a bun that's messy, with a miscolored Sulu and the torn t-shirt, making breakfast. We don't want the fancy French kitchen with the French windows and, the marble counters and all of that. No, we want our children to read these stories and say, man, this is the same kitchen I grew up in. So that's around the illustrators. And the last one was, the most important one is, what are the stories we want to write? It seems like such an easy thing to say, but the example I have is a boy named Tomasi, and the story follows him going on 4 different transport modes to get chemo treatment. And it's a beautiful story. But in every single scene and setting, it's in his village, it's in his family house, and so even though the stories are very big and the themes are very big, what are the stories we're trying to tell? Are we telling our children that they never have to apologize for the way their hair sits? They never have to apologize for any of these things because that's part of their culture. But more importantly, how are we addressing these big issues and making sure our kids are reading and seeing themselves in all these things? They're not seeing foreign concepts. I feel like we're gonna save the world after this symposium, but that's the main thing is around literacy. We're trying to get kids to read, and if that means that we're drawing all these things and we're spending all of this time talking to writers about being as authentic as possible, then I think we have a way of getting back into our kids with tradition and our culture. Naka.
Vinaka, Christelle, for this colorful presentation. Yes, one of the key words I can retain is partnership. So, from what I heard earlier in the afternoon with the Remix project as well, I'm sure there should be a lot of partnerships that can be some of the outcomes of the symposium. Is there any question or comments? Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. A question I was going to ask earlier that seems relevant also to your presentation is the idea of oral histories and marrying that with promotion of reading. So when we talk about creating a culture of reading, not only looking at it as sort of lack of literacy, but also connecting it to culture that's already there in terms of oral storytelling. And so what I found very interesting was the book labs. And I wanted to ask you how that connects to oral storytelling, or do you find the connection there, and is that helping creating that culture of reading?
Thank you. It's a very complex question, my gosh. But I think one of the simplest ways to answer that is, the intention is really simple. We want the stories to be relatable, and so one of the ways we kind of unintentionally incorporate storytelling is when a story is created in our book labs, it's often read back to their peers or other authors in the room. And some of the funniest reactions happen, like, people don't talk like that in our communities. Like, where are you getting this dialogue from? So it's, it's going right down to that. Because sometimes, unintentionally, we write with not with a specific lens, we write with a different lens. We're writing to a different audience. So that's where I guess, does that answer?
Thank you, Crystal. I'm so excited about the work that the Asia Foundation is doing, and I think you are bridging that gap. I think both of us, we know we grew up with reading books that we didn't see ourselves in. Still now in school in Fiji, we're still, if I'm correct, we're still reading I Heard the Owl Call My Name, The River Between, Treasure Island and Drolocles and the Lion, Nothing About Us. So I'm very excited that children from a young age, they're reading about themselves, they're seeing themselves in the illustrations, and they're going to become readers, older readers who are interested in reading about themselves. And yeah, thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you. Sorry, the question was around the Melanesian series. So there was a flyer that circulated prior to the Melanesian Arts Festival. We've opened the submissions to extend beyond the initial dates. So if there's a children's story you want to write, or if you know of illustrators, please submit your stories or your illustrations. I'll reach out to House Historian and Anna to recirculate that poster. But yeah, that's how the theme of the Melanesian series is the Mighty Melanesian Girl. So it's not just about news stories, it can be a folklore that you're reinventing. It's really anything, and it's from the entire Melanesian region. So we welcome any stories.
Thank you, Tomas. I am so inspired by your talk, and thank you, Tomas, for all the foundations that you have laid for our children, in the past, now, and into the future.